Hey guys, this is Eric Vasquez here with a brand new tutorial for you today from designcuts.com. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to design a retro funk album cover in Photoshop. To do this, we'll be working with the Beardy typeface from the Amazing Designers Creative Collection. This all-new collection features high-quality brushes, textures, fonts, and lettering kits from some of the top creators in the industry today. Along with this, we'll make use of a handful of free stock photos and textures to complete our design. So if you're all ready for a blast from the past, then fire up Photoshop and let's get started. The first thing we're going to do here is create a new document in Photoshop, and we want to make it 7.5 inches wide by 7.5 inches tall. So it's going to be a square, just like a traditional album CD cover type of art. Now let's go ahead and give our document a name. I'm going to call this Love and Funk Album Cover Design. Now we'll go ahead and leave the resolution at 300. The RGB color mode is fine, and then we can leave the background content set to white and then go ahead and click Create. Now the first thing you'll notice here when you have your new document is that you've got a single background layer. So let's start by coming down here to the adjustment layer icon and adding a solid color adjustment layer. For the fill color, I'm going to enter the hex value 060D10, which is this deep dark blue color, and then go ahead and press return to apply the changes. And now we'll come up to the file menu and choose place embedded to bring in our first image. Now I already have these files downloaded, but in the written portion of this tutorial I've provided you guys with a couple of free resources that you have to go and download to follow along with the tutorial. Some of those resources include these two stock images that we're going to be working with today. So you'll see this one here of this singer in the blue light that we're going to choose, and we'll go ahead and click place to bring that in. And then once we have it in Photoshop here, it'll automatically be brought in as a smart object with the image name included in the layer. So all I'm doing here is just scaling this up a bit from the center, and I'm going to move it over here towards the left side of the image. Alright, somewhere about there looks pretty good. And then go ahead and press return to apply the transformation. Now we may move it around a little bit later, but for now this placement looks pretty good. Come back to the adjustment layer icon and add a black and white adjustment layer, and then we'll come back again, and this time we're going to add a gradient map. Now once you add the gradient map, let me bring over my properties here. You'll see that we have this gradient, and if we click on it, it'll allow us to change the colors here in the gradient editor. So the way that we're going to do that is by clicking on this square in the lower left, and the square on top actually controls the opacity. So we want that to remain at 100% and just change the color. So let's go ahead and click on that first color there, and I'll enter the hex value 141D35. Okay, click OK, and then come over here to the square on the bottom right, and you can just double click on that also. And now for this hex value, let's go ahead and enter 00FFD8. Alright, so you've got this bright blue color. Go ahead and click OK, and now we can just move our properties back to the side. Alright, so you should now have your gradient map just on top of your black and white adjustment layer. And then let's select that black and white adjustment layer and press Command Control plus J to duplicate it, and then Command Control and the right bracket to move it on top. So you should now have two black and white adjustment layers with your gradient map kind of sandwiched in between. Alright, so that's going to give us a bit more of a slightly kind of washed out black and white, rather than that stark high contrast black and white. Now from here we'll go ahead and select that top black and white adjustment layer, hold the shift key and select our color fill adjustment layer, and then press Command Control G and double click on the Group 1 text to rename this folder main image. Now select that background layer and you can just delete it. I'm going to come back up to the file menu and choose place embedded once again. And now I'm going to go ahead and bring in one of the other free resources here, which is going to be our textures. Now again, in the written portion of the design tutorial, I've provided you guys with links to both of these texture packs. One is from Graphics Fuel and the other from Graphic Burger. So let's go here to the Graphic Fuel pack, and I'm going to select the first texture here, Overlay Texture 1. Now these are just some really nice kind of dust and dirt textures that you can add on top of your image to make them look kind of gritty and vintage and worn. Alright, and since we're creating a retro album cover, this is really going to help us to push that. Okay, so we don't want it to look brand new, we want it to look kind of old and vintage. So all I'm doing here is scaling this up by dragging outwards while holding the Alt, Option, and Shift keys, and then I'll go ahead and press return, and then we're going to change the blend mode from normal to screen. Let's press 5 on the keyboard to reduce the opacity to 50%, and then I'm going to hold the Alt Option key and click on the adjustment layer icon and add a levels adjustment layer. Now the reason we held that Alt Option key is because we wanted to get this menu here, which allows us to use the layer below to create a clipping mask. So check that box off and then click OK. And now you'll see this small arrow here indicating that a clipping mask is applied and that this adjustment is only going to affect this layer. So in the Properties panel over here, all we're going to do is take this slider and move it in towards the center until it's set to somewhere around 36. Alright, and that's just going to add some more contrast there to our texture. Come back up to File, choose Place Embedded once again, and now let's go to the other texture pack. Alright, this time we're going to select 2 PNG from the Graphic Burger pack and choose Place. Okay, hold the Alt, Option, and Shift keys and drag outwards to scale it up a bit. Press Enter or Return. Change the blend mode to screen. And now, this time, let's hold the Alt, Option key, click on the adjustment layer icon, and instead of levels, we're going to choose curves. Check off this box once again to use the previous layer to create a clipping mask. And now let's go ahead and click in the center of our grid to make a point. And we're just going to manually input these settings here. Let's go ahead and put in 217 for the input. And for the output, I'll put in 79. Alright, so we're really crunching that down a bit. And you can see how that's looking. Now we're going to select that top curves adjustment layer, hold Shift, and then select our Overlay Texture 1 Smart Object. Press Command-Control-G to put it into a group folder. Double-click that Group 1 text and call this folder Textures. Now press V to get your Move tool, and then 4 on the keyboard to reduce the opacity of this entire folder to 40%. I'm going to come back down here to the adjustment layer icon, and now add a solid color adjustment layer. Now for this, I'll enter the hex value 409-4AF, which is this nice blue color. Click OK, and change the blend mode from normal to multiply, and then press 6 on the keyboard to reduce the opacity to 60%. Alright, let's zoom in a little bit there. And I'm just going to move some of these panels away. And now we'll come back up to File and choose Place Embedded to bring in our other free stock image. Alright, so again, I've already downloaded both of these images from Unsplash, but you guys will find both of these links in the written portion of the tutorial. Okay, I'm going to zoom out a bit here just using Command and the minus key. Hold Alt, Option, and Shift and scale this up quite a bit so that we just get some of that smoke in there. Okay, maybe move it down and to the left a bit, and then press Return. Now I'm going to change the blending mode of this layer to Color Dodge, and then hold the Alt Option key, click on the adjustment layer icon, and add a Levels adjustment layer with a clipping mask. Okay, now over here in the Properties, I'm just going to move this slider in towards the center until it's set to 34. And then select that top Levels adjustment layer, hold Shift and select the smoke stock image below. Press Command-Control-G to put it into a folder, double-click the Group 1 text, and rename this folder Smoke. So now, if I zoom in, you guys can see that that smoke adds some brightness and texture over the whole image. The next thing we're going to do is come back to the adjustment layer icon, add another gradient map on top, and then over here in the Properties, we can modify those colors a little bit. All right, so I'm just going to dock those two together. Let's click on the gradient here to change the colors. And again, we're just going to be adding some colors to this one. So we're going to double click that first color. And let's go ahead and make this maybe a nice bright yellow. So we'll go F9D615, click OK. And then click anywhere along the bottom here to add another color. And we'll set this one to, you can see the location here. So I'm placing it around 34%. Double click on it to change this color. And then for this, we'll enter the hex value FD7C00, which is this bright orange. Click to add a third color with a location of about 67. Double click on it or click this color swatch down here. And this one we're going to make 6F156C. Alright, get that nice purple in there. And then our last color, just go ahead and double click on that white fill at the end we'll change this to 081B40, which is this nice deep blue color. Now, we've added our 4 colors, so we can go ahead and click OK. And you can see how that looks, right? It looks a little bit like what the Predator sees in the Predator movies or something, but we can change this really quick just by clicking this reverse box. And now you can actually see, some of the details and shadows on this guy. So that's looking much better. Now come back down to the adjustment layer icon, and we're going to add a hue saturation adjustment layer. And I'm just going to crank the hue, the first slider here, up to about 120 or 121 or so. All right, somewhere about there. Come back down, click again, and add a solid color adjustment layer. And now for the hex value here, I'll enter 6D4915. Right? Click on that. And now I'm going to press the number 6 to reduce the opacity to 60% and change the blending mode from normal to color all the way down here at the bottom. Now let's add another adjustment layer. This time we'll go with the levels. And you'll notice that none of these have clipping masks because I want them to affect the entire overall image here. Alright, so now back here in the properties, let's just move this slider in towards the center until it's somewhere around 20 to 22. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now select that top levels adjustment layer, hold shift and select our gradient map, press Command-Control-G to put it into a group folder, double click the group 1 text, and I'm just going to call this folder adjustment layers since it just contains a group of adjustment layers that allows us to modify the colors. Now I'm going to undock this here, move the properties back over. Now come up to the window menu and we're going to open the character panel so we can begin adding some text. Alright, so I'm going to add another new layer here, and I'll just press D on the keyboard to reset my default colors and then press X to toggle back and forth between the foreground and background so that my foreground color is white instead of black. Now press T on the keyboard to get your type tool, click, and I'm going to type out the word love with a capital L and lowercase OVE. And now I'll press Command-Control-A to select that entire line of text. And over here in the character panel, I'm just going to highlight the type and change the size to about 224 points, so it's nice and big. Now I can move that over here somewhere. And let me just change my screen view for a second there. Now what I want to show you guys is what I'm currently using is one of the typefaces in the design bundle called the Beardy Pro, and it's got a couple of really nice styles in here. But in case you guys don't have access to this font, I've provided a link in the written portion of the tutorial for a free typeface that has a very similar look and feel to it. I believe it's called Funky and it's from defont.com, so be sure to check that out just in case you guys don't have access to this particular typeface from the bundle, even though I would strongly recommend getting it because it is a really beautiful typeface. So once you've typed this in here, I want to go and show you guys something cool, which, a lot of fonts these days have these cool alternates where if you select the letter and highlight it, you'll see this panel here where you can choose some different looking characters. So I'm going to change the L here just by clicking on that, and then we'll go ahead and select the lowercase o, and let's pick the alternate for that as well. Alright, so we've now got a little bit more swirls and some cool motion going on, and this L kind of underlining the O. Now I'm going to click a few times to highlight this entire line, click on the color over here, and then change it to F9D615, which is this nice yellow color. Go ahead and click OK. And now let's take our type tool again and just move the cursor between the O and the V, and then press Alt, Option, and the left arrow key. Do the same thing between the V and the E, just to reduce a little bit of that space there. And I've done the same between the L and the O. Okay, now we can click off of that. And now let's go ahead and add another new layer. Using the same typeface, we'll go ahead and just type out the word and in all uppercase. And for this, I'll press Command-Control-A to select the whole line, and we'll change the size from 224 to 69 point. We can use the same fill color here, and then we're just going to move it up just to the left of this descender on the L below the V and the E. So kind of tuck it in somewhere about there. Now select the Love type layer and press Command-Control-J to duplicate it, and then Command-Control and the right bracket to move it to the top of the layers palette. Now hold the Shift and the down arrow keys together just to move this down. Press T to get your type tool, click inside 2 times to highlight the text, and now we're going to type out funk with a capital F and a lowercase UNK. Now we're going to do the same thing that we did before, where if we select the first letter, we're given the option to choose from a few of these alternate characters. So I'm going to go ahead and change that, and maybe let's also change the N here. All right, we'll pick one of these nice cool looking alternates, and then let's go ahead and do the same thing with the letter K. Just pick this one from down here, and that's looking pretty cool. Now I'm just going to bump this over a little bit and reposition it slightly just so this fits together in a nice looking lockup. Alright, so somewhere about there looks pretty cool. Maybe we can give it a bit more breathing room. And then we can also select our and maybe tap it down a little bit just so that it fills out that space in the middle nice and evenly. Alright, now just like before, you can come in here with your type tool and you can add or remove a little bit of space from between these letters, but I don't think this one needs too much adjusting. Now that you've done that, we're going to select this top text layer, hold the Shift key and select the bottom text layer, and instead of putting it in a group folder just yet, I'm going to hold the Control key, click on any of the layers, and choose Convert to Smart Object. And you guys will see why I'm doing this in just a second. Now, I'm just going to reposition the text a little bit here. Maybe move it over, move it down just a bit. Right, somewhere over there, because I want the type to overlap some of the singer's face and hand, just a bit. Doesn't have to be too much. All right, but somewhere about there looks pretty good. Now I'm just going to double click this text layer and just call this TT for title treatment because it's going to be our main smart object layer. Now press Command Control J to duplicate it, then Command Control in the left bracket to move it down. And what we're going to do now is create a reusable custom Photoshop action. Because what we want to do is add kind of a long shadow effect here, like what you would see in a lot of kind of, posters from this time, from like the 60s and 70s. So before we do that, come up to the window menu and choose Actions. And all we're going to do is make our new action here. It's going to be very quick, very basic, but it's a really handy feature to know if you guys haven't used it before. So let's go ahead and click on this action icon here on the bottom right next to the trash can to create a new action. And I'm just going to go ahead and call it Extrude. Now, once I hit record, you won't be recorded in real time. It's just going to record the steps, so don't feel like you need to rush through or anything like that. All right, go ahead and click record. And now over here in the layers palette, all we're going to do is press Command Control J to make a copy, Command Control in the left bracket to move that copy down below the previous layer, press the down arrow once and the right arrow once. Now click stop to stop recording, and you now have your very basic and simple Photoshop action. So all we're going to do from here is make sure that our TT Copy 2 layer is selected, and now we can just click this play button maybe about 20 times or so, and it's going to move each copy down into the right one time. So it creates this nice long shadow effect. Okay, so what we're going to do here, we can close the actions now, move the character panel out of the way. I'm going to select the very bottom copy, scroll up, hold the Shift key, and select the first copy just under our main TT Smart Object layer. Press Command Control G to put it into a group folder. Double click the Group 1 text, and we'll just call this Extrude. Now we can double click on this Extrude folder and apply a layer style to every copy inside. So I'm going to check off Color Overlay here and fill it with this nice orange color. I'm using D9581F. Click OK. And now let's also check off the stroke option because I want to add a little bit of thickness to it. I'm going to change the position from inside to outside, and we'll make it about 6 pixels or so. And now for the fill color, let's go ahead and use the same color that we're using for the inside. Alright, so a quick way to kind of do that would just be to use the eyedropper and click on some of the orange in the background, but it's actually not letting me grab that color. So what I'm going to do is just say cancel, come over here, grab that color, copy it, Command C, come back to stroke, click on that color, highlight the hex value and paste it, then just go ahead and click OK twice. So you now see that you've got this cool long shadow effect happening. Now select that top TT Smart Object layer and then press Command Control J to duplicate it. click inside here and rename it Inline. And then we're going to drop the fill from 100 to 0. So now if I turn those other layers off, even though the inline layer is still on, we can't see it because the fill is all the way at 0. Alright, but that's not going to stop us from being able to see any layer styles that we apply. So that's kind of a neat little trick. So now what we can do is check off the stroke option, change it from outside to inside, and let's make this stroke about 10 pixels. And now we'll go ahead and change this color to FD9400, which is a lighter kind of orange-yellow color. Go ahead and click OK twice to apply the changes and close out, and you've now got some really cool and interesting looking type effects. Not only that, but it really stands out on the background. So now what I'm going to do is click on that arrow just to collapse that layer style there. Select the inline smart object layer, hold shift and select the extrude group folder, and now press Command Control G to put this all into a group just called TT for title treatment. Now from here, I'm going to press V to get my move tool, press 5 to lower the opacity of this whole group to about 50%, and now if I zoom in, you can see through the type so that you can see exactly where your text is overlapping. Alright, so now I'm just going to reposition it slightly. Somewhere about there looks pretty good. And now what I'll do is come over here to the Layers palette and click on this icon at the bottom to add a layer mask to that whole folder. Now I'm going to press B on the keyboard to get my brush tool, make my brush a little bit larger, and what we're looking for here is a solid black foreground color. So again, press X to toggle between your foreground and background colors, alright, until black is the foreground color. And in the top toolbar here in your brush settings, we want to make sure that the opacity is at 100% and that the brush is a relatively hard brush. If you have a soft airbrush, we don't want that because we want some nice crisp edges. So in order to ensure that your brush has a hard edge, just hold the shift key and tap the right bracket. And you can see, I already have a hard brush, but if I go the opposite way and I press the left bracket, you can see in my brush preview up here at the top that it's appearing to be softer. So to make it hard edged, we're going to use shift and the right bracket. If you wanted a soft edge, you would use shift and the left bracket. Okay, so get that hard edge brush, and then just by pressing the left and right brackets alone without the shift key, it allows you to quickly change the size of your brush. So we're going to get in here nice and close, and with the opacity of our TT folder reduced, we're able to kind of get a sense of where we need to brush over to make it look as though the singer's face is coming in front of the text. Okay, so we're going to do that here over the hands. And don't worry if you mess up, all you have to do is press X to toggle between black and white. And if white is your foreground color, it'll allow you to paint back in. So any areas that you mess up, you can just go over it in white instead of black, and it will correct it. Okay, so I'm just using a mouse for this, but it's probably a little bit easier if you guys have a tablet or a stylus if you're comfortable using that. And in order to drag around, I'm just holding the space bar and then clicking and dragging so that I can use the hand tool to easily and quickly kind of navigate around the image. Alright, so I'm just coming in here, brushing around the hand and the knuckles a little bit. And this is really going to add quite a bit of depth. Alright, and it's going to make it look more interesting too. It's going to give a sense that, the text and the image are feeling more integrated this way. Alright, so now I'm just using the right bracket to make the brush a bit larger as I come in a little bit further away from the edges. Okay, make it a little bit smaller. You just come down here just a little bit. Okay, and maybe we want to press V now to get your move tool, and then type 0 to bring the opacity back up to 100%. And you can see when I've done that I actually missed a couple of little spots in here, so I'm just going to go back in, clean that up, and then press Command Control 0 to fit this to your screen. So you can now see how that's starting to look. But I think I want to come back in here, maybe just make a few other quick little adjustments, right, just to make that look a little bit better. I don't think his cheek and mouth would be completely flat there, so I'm just going to brush out a little bit extra, just about there. Alright, and that's looking pretty cool. So now if you wanted to, you can open this folder, select all 3 of the layers in the group folder inside, and now if you just tap the arrows around, you can move this around without changing the mask. Alright, so I'm just tapping it over to the right slightly so it's a little bit further away from his face. Then go ahead and collapse that folder once again. Now that we've done that, let's go ahead and add another new layer. Press T to get your type tool. And this time I'm just going to type out the name Thomas. Press Command-Control A to select my text. And let's go ahead and change the size of this to about 40 point. And I'll make the tracking, I guess 20. 20 is pretty good. But for the fill color, I want to sample some of that yellow. Press OK. Press Command-Control T so you can do a free transform and just move it over here, somewhere in this empty space over here. Okay. Now press Command-Control J and then Command-Control in the left bracket to move this copy down. Hold the Shift key and the down arrow to place this second line below the first. Click inside, and now we'll type out the name Mayfield. Click on your Move tool to deselect the text and then zoom in a bit. And just like before, I'm going to press T to get my type tool and move my cursor between the A and the Y and just tap the Alt option and left arrow, maybe once or twice, because there's a little bit too much space between the A and the Y. Just a small kind of nitpicky detail, but it ends up making a difference. Now select the Thomas text layer, press Command-Control J to duplicate it, and then hold the Shift and the up arrow to move it on top. Now here I'm going to type out presented by in upper and lowercase. Press Command-Control A to select that whole line there, and let's make this line a little bit smaller. Maybe we'll make this around 32 point. Click on the color and sample some of that orange from the extruded text back here just to tie it together. And then go ahead and click on the Move tool again. Okay, now we can go ahead and close our character panel. Select the Presented by text layer, hold Shift and select the Mayfield text layer. And then up here in the toolbar, we're just going to go ahead and select this Align Horizontal Centers to make sure everything's nice and centered, which it is. And while you still have these layers selected, press Command-Control G to put it into a folder. Double-click the Group 1 text, and let's just go ahead and call this folder Thomas Mayfield. Alright, zoom out a little bit. And now I'm just going to reposition that text somewhere about there. Looks pretty good. And now let's go ahead and add a nice border to our image. So for this, I'll press U to get my shape tool here, or the rectangle tool, sorry. And up here in the top toolbar, you'll see that we have none for the fill. So just click that white box with the red strike through it. And for the stroke, let's go ahead and change that color. So once I click on the stroke here, you'll see that you have this icon in the upper right, which is our color picker. So if I click on that, I can now sample some of that orange from the extruded shadow, and I'll have the exact same hex value. Now click OK, and let's go ahead and maybe change the thickness of the border to about 6 pixels or so. And now all we're going to do is come in from the edge on the upper left a little bit, click, hold the Shift key, and drag out to make a perfect square. Okay, so we now have a nice orange border going around all the corners of our image. So I'm just going to double click that layer and rename it border. And now come down here to the adjustment layer icon, and we're going to add a curves adjustment to our overall image. So for this, I'll just bring my properties panel over here once again, click to make a point roughly in the center, and let's go ahead and manually input the values 140 for the input, and for the output we can use 115 to add a bit more contrast. Select the adjustment layer, press V to get your Move tool, and then type the number 5 just to reduce that to about half the strength, or 50% of the intensity. Now select that top layer, hold the Shift key, select your very bottom main image group folder, press Command-Control G to put everything into one group folder, and then double click it, and I'm just going to rename this Artwork because it contains all of our beautiful retro funk album artwork. So there you have it, guys. We now have our Love and Funk album cover design straight out of the 70s, very retro, very vintage, and very cool looking. To make this, we've used some free resources today, but the real hero here is the typeface from the Amazing Designers Creative Collection. Now there's a lot of great stuff in here, guys. Just like I said at the top of this tutorial, you'll definitely want to check it out and see all of these high quality professional resources that'll help you guys step up your design game. It really is a great deal, so definitely check that out. But I hope that you guys have found this tutorial today to be helpful. Hopefully you've learned some new tips and tricks along the way. Even, working with Photoshop actions and doing some cool stuff like that can really come in handy to just create some interesting effects, and the beauty of it is just that you can reuse it on any project. So thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Eric Vasquez, and we'll see you next time.